Imagine the biggest, most powerful guns ever put on a warship. I mean, a weapon so huge it was supposed to dominate the entire ocean. Now, what if I told you that in 4 years of war, these incredible guns sank exactly 0 enemy warships? Yeah, 0. So let's get into the story of the battleship Yamato and how its greatest strength turned out to be its most spectacular failure.
First off, you just have to grasp the sheer scale we're talking about here. The main battery had 9 of these guns, each one with a caliber of 18.1 inches. That's 46 centimeters. To this day, no one has ever put bigger guns on a ship. They are the largest naval guns ever made. Period.
And the shells they fired? Oh man, each one weighed over 3,200 pounds. That's the weight of a small car. They were perfectly described as taller than a man, wider than a telephone pole. A single explosion from one of these could blast a crater 30 feet deep. The power was just on another level.
And this wasn't just some ship. The Yamato was meant to be the absolute pinnacle of battleship design, a floating fortress built specifically around these guns. It was designed to be the ultimate weapon, a ship that could engage and destroy any enemy fleet from a distance no one else could even dream of matching.
But, and this is a huge but, all of that incredible power came with a massive, and I do mean massive, design flaw. I mean, what do you do when firing your own guns is almost as dangerous as getting shot at? That was the reality the crew of the Yamato had to face every single time they went to battle stations. The shockwave from firing a full broadside was so unbelievably violent, it would knock out the ship's radios, shatter windows on the bridge, and literally blow any spotter planes right off their catapults on the deck. Crew members suffered permanent hearing damage, even when they were behind thick steel walls. The ship was literally tearing itself apart just by trying to fight.
And then you run into a little problem called physics. See, on paper, these guns had a jaw-dropping range of 26 miles, but because the Earth is round, the ship's spotters couldn't actually see a target that far away. The horizon got in the way at about 15 miles. Then, in the smoke and chaos of a real battle, that effective range dropped to just 9 miles. So more than half of the gun's theoretical power, poof, gone, completely unusable.
So here's the real kicker. Even within its effective range, the Yamato's guns were shockingly inaccurate. And this is where the myth of their incredible power just completely shatters.
At long range, the probability of a single shell hitting an enemy ship was just 0.2%.
Yeah, let that sink in for a second. That's not 2%. That is 0.2%. That's one possible hit for every 500 shells you fire. Think about what that actually means in a fight. To have a statistical chance of landing just one hit on a ship far away, the Yamato would have to fire its guns for 45 minutes straight. And that's assuming the enemy ship is nice enough to just sit there and not move or, shoot back. It's statistically absurd. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to what it was like on the receiving end. An American destroyer captain who faced the Yamato said the shells created magnificent columns of water that were spectacular and terrifying. But, he added, they were also consistently 300 yards away. They were more of a fireworks show than a weapon. So because of all these problems, not to mention a crippling fuel shortage, the Yamato basically never fought. Out of the 1,200 days it was in service, it spent a tiny 0.8% of its life, that's just 10 days, in actual combat. The rest of the time, it was hiding in port, basically becoming a very expensive, very heavily armed hotel.
And the strategic cost of this choice was catastrophic. Japan built 2 of these giant ships, but the resources they poured into just one Yamato could have built 1,000 fighter aircraft. So they chose 2 ships that couldn't hit anything over 2,000 planes that they desperately needed in the air. It was a terrible trade-off.
And that brings us to the final, fatal flaw. Because you know what? Even if the guns had been perfectly accurate, it wouldn't have mattered. The Yamato was already obsolete the day it was launched.
The age of the battleship was just over. World War II was a war of air power, and the Yamato was a dinosaur staring up at the asteroid about to hit. Its real enemy wasn't another giant ship. It was the hundreds of small planes that could strike from way beyond the horizon.
And its end came so fast, it was brutal. On its very last mission, the Yamato was swarmed by almost 400 US carrier planes. In just 2 hours, it was hit by at least 11 torpedoes and 6 direct bombs. It rolled over, exploded, and took over 3,000 crew members down with it. And here is the ultimate bitter irony.
In today's money, a single shell from the Yamato's main guns cost about $50,000. The aerial torpedoes that actually sank the ship, they cost about $1,000 each. The Yamato was destroyed by weapons that were 50 times cheaper than its own useless ammunition.
You know, the entire tragic story of this ship is really summed up perfectly in its final orders. A mission that everyone involved knew from the start was completely impossible.
It was called Operation 10 Go. The plan was to send the Yamato on a one-way trip to Okinawa, deliberately run it aground on the beach, and use it as a sort of unsinkable gun platform. Command knew it would never make it. It was a purely symbolic, suicidal gesture.
And the thing is, even the crew knew the truth. One of the survivors later said that they all called their ship Hotel Yamato because the food was good and it had air conditioning. He said, "Our great guns were decoration. We'd polish them, maintain them, dream about using them. When we finally did, we were already sinking."